Hello everyone! In this lesson, we are going to watch a mock reading writing lesson and see what we can learn from it. We are going to watch the whole lesson first and then we will focus on a number of important extracts of the lesson and analyze them. Now, let's get started.
Hello and welcome to Pearson Speaking About Pedagogy and Practice in English featured speaker series. I'm Jennifer Edwards with the marketing team and I'm glad you could join us today. I hope that you find the ideas being presented by our speaker Kathleen McWhorter valuable for your classroom teaching. For those of you who are new to the webinar format, I have a few quick things to point out before our session begins. If you're calling in by phone, please know that this is not a toll-free number. For that reason, we recommend that you select Use Mic and Speakers in the control bar so you can listen toll-free through your computer speakers. You may have noticed that your line has also been muted. This is to minimize background noise or any interruptions to the presentation. We encourage you to ask questions by typing in the text box marked Questions on the right-hand side of your screen in the webinar dashboard. If your dashboard seems to have disappeared, hit the orange arrow and it will open back up. You can send us your questions at any point, and when the formal presentation is over, we'll be using the remaining time to pose as many of your questions as possible to our speaker. Any questions we don't get to will be forwarded to Kathleen along with your email address so that all questions will be answered one way or another. Please include your name and school at the beginning of your question. We would also like to invite you to keep up with this conversation on Twitter. To do that, you can follow us at Pearson North AM and use the hashtag PearsonLearn. Today's session is titled A Scaffolded Approach to Teaching Integrated Reading and Writing by Kathleen McWhorter. Dr. Kathleen McWhorter is the author of more than a dozen reading, writing, and integrated reading and writing textbooks designed to help students succeed in college. She has over 34 years of teaching experience in both 2- and 4-year colleges and is currently devoting most of her time to developing materials for integrated reading and writing courses. All right, Kathleen, are you ready to get started?
I am.
Excellent.
Thank you for joining me. Before we begin, I have to caution you about a couple of things. First, I'm working in my home office, and I have 2 golden retrievers working right here with me. They promised not to bark, since I told them this is an important webinar, but they might not listen, and all bets are definitely off if you hear the doorbell or if they spot a rabbit in the yard. So you might hear them. Please bear with that. And the other thing you need to know about me is that I'm electronically jinxed. My friends at Pearson, I'm sure, can attest to that one. It's so bad, actually, that my son-in-law, also my go-to tech guy, says, quote, if it's electronic and she touches it, it's going to be trouble. And so I'm taking steps to avert that. So I've asked my editor, Jill Cook, to join with me in this session today. She'll help me with the screen, but more importantly, she can contribute a lot to our discussion and to the presentation. Jill and I have worked together for 15 years on all of my books, so don't be surprised if we even complete each other's sentences. Jill, can you say hello so we know you're there?
Hi everybody, this is Jill Cook. As Kathleen said, we've been working together for many, many years on all of her books, and we do often think the same thing and say the same thing at the same time, but we'll try and say different things as we do this presentation.
Thank you. Okay, let's get started. Let's think first about where we are today with integrated reading and writing, IRW for short. It's new to most of us. We're all trying to figure it out. It's not something a lot of us chose, but it's our job now. And actually, I think it's turning out quite well. I'm pretty pleased. I'm excited about it. Some of us are just beginning. Others of you have had, I'm sure, a lot of experience with it, a few years or maybe more. I think most of us are still tweaking it, finding out what works and what doesn't work, and working to make things that seem okay even better. We're experimenting, we're sharing results. I don't think anybody has all the answers yet. I want to assure you that I don't. But what I'd like to do this afternoon is to share with you one approach that I found works well in meeting the challenges we face as we teach IRW. So I've picked out 4 challenges. There's many more, but I'm sure you're familiar with these, so we won't dwell on this, but we all know we've got a compressed time frame. 15 weeks is shrunk to 8 in some cases. That's one problem. And there's fewer level courses. I remember back when there were 4 levels of reading courses. and 2 to 3 levels of writing courses. Now they're combined and we've had fewer levels. So we have to move students along faster and we have less instructional time. Due to the fact that we've got fewer courses, we've got a wider range of skill levels of students in our classes. That makes it harder to teach. And we have 2 risks in a wide range skill level class. One is we leave the weaker students behind, or we don't challenge the more advanced ones. So there's the problem. But we're looking for solutions, so we'll move on here. And then given these 3 challenges, then we need to think about scaffolding. Availability of materials. What I'm going to try to do is show you an approach to tie together.
Go ahead.
Okay, we're together now. So I'm going to show you how to use scaffolding. Let's define scaffolding. It's a teaching strategy, and it moves students progressively and sequentially toward improved reading and writing. And the key words here are sequential and progressive. Think of scaffolding next to a building, just a regular old metal thing sitting next to a building. It's a structure that enables workers to climb or reach toward higher heights on the building. Well, I'm going to try to show you how to progressively and gradually move students to new heights up the building, so to speak, toward better reading and writing. So how does scaffolding work? What does it do? I've got 3 bullet points for you on the screen there. It moves students from simple to complex. I think we all do that to extent in our classroom. An example, we start with sentence and paragraph writing, we move to more complex essay writing. In reading, we use easy vocabulary and then move to more difficult. We start with literal, factual questions and move to critical thinking. That's one aspect. The second aspect is more help to less help, more guidance to less. I think we do this to an extent already, but let's do it consciously and deliberately and sequentially. An example might be paraphrasing. If you're not giving a student any help, we would just say, here's what a paraphrase is, here's a sample one, go do one. That's no help at all. To provide some help, we could show them one, tell them how to do it, and then give them a partially complete one. That's giving the students some guidance. And then after they've filled in the partially complete one, help them write their own. So that's what I mean by from guided to independent learning. And we want to move students from low to high stakes writing. We want to have them start with sentence writing if they need to, move on to paragraphs, move to essays, and the kind of writing they're doing needs to progress from summary writing to essay writing to perhaps documented papers. So I'd like to show you then today, and this is really the bulk of my presentation, is a demonstration of scaffolding. So I have chosen 3 levels. These are kind of arbitrary. Have you ever watched Rachel Ray on the Food Network? She can show you how to cook a chicken 3 different ways in 23 minutes. Well, I'm going to try to do the same thing with one reading. I'm going to show you how to use a single reading and adapt it 3 different ways to suit students at different points in the reading and learning process. Can't guarantee the 23-minute part though. But level 1, as you can see on the screen here, we're starting probably at the beginning of the term, but although it could be earlier or later. Focus on literal and paragraph writing. And then we move to the second level, focus on critical thinking and essay writing. You can see me gradually progressing, and you can see a sequential nature here. And then perhaps toward the end of the term, more focus on for reading, evaluation, and analysis, and response writing. So let's look. What I've prepared for you here is, and this is really my Word file. And let me give you a couple of, so I'm going to work through the reading 3 different ways, like 3 different chicken dishes. You're going to see, first you're going to see me using level 1, which is, now level 1 is again, the emphasis on literal reading and paragraph writing. It's bare bones, literal. Who did what, when, and where is what I'm working with from the reading perspective. From the writing perspective, what I'm working on is sentence writing and very basic paragraph writing. Now, this is what I'm going to I've got some apparatus here, and later on the screen you'll see that there's a piece of a reading here. I'm not even going to put the whole reading up here. That's not important. What I'm showing you right now is what you would do before you present the reading to a student. I think I'd like to caution you, though, that the reading here is not what you're really teaching. It's hard to realize that, but it isn't. The reading that we're using here is a brother lost, as you can see at the top. But it's easy to think we're teaching that reading, but we're not. We're teaching the process that a student goes through in reading this reading and writing about it. You know, I have a literature background. I know Jill does. I suspect many of you do as well. In literature, what we want to do is teach the poem. It's valuable. It has intrinsic value. We like it. We want our students to like it. And we're teaching it. But here we're not. This Brother Lost, it's a competent reading. Perhaps maybe you could even argue it's literature. We don't need to go down that road, though. But it's really not what we're teaching. What we're teaching is how to go about reading so they can read anything they need to in a textbook, in an English class, later on the job. So let me walk you through what I would do with a reading. My goal here is to show you how you can develop materials like this for your own students. Now, this is level 1. Go ahead, Jill.
Kathleen, I just jump in here for a second. Kathleen's going to use this reading, the same reading, each time to show how you could take one reading and teach skills at different levels, scaffold and build the skills, as she just explained, from a level 1, which is a focus on literal reading and paragraph writing, through to the higher level critical thinking skills. So you'll see the title repeated each time we go to a different level, but we're showing how you can use the same material in different ways to build on basic skills.
Great. Thank you, Jill. So let me start them. First of all, I think the very first time I showed a student a level 1 reading, I would work through it with them. I would work with it in class. I'd have it up on a screen, and I would start right in. And first of all, I'd point out the head note to them. Students tend to skip it. I think we do too. What we want to explain students why they should look at that. We don't care about this particular head note. We want them to get in the habit of reading head notes. You need to explain to them that it provides a focus, and we know it gets students' mind on the reading and off of whatever they're doing, the last text message they sent or something. So we want them to look at that and point out the value of it. And then I've got steps here. Step 1, students need to preview, and I would walk them through it. In fact, I might put the whole reading up on a screen, and I would highlight as I'm reading so they could see exactly the parts of a reading that they need to preview. And I think they need to know the benefits. It tells them what to expect. It makes reading easier. They'll buy it for those 2 reasons. And then after they've previewed, I think it's very important that students connect to their own experience. I think this is important at all levels. So you will see that these 2 steps are going to stay in all 3 versions of my reading. Here I'm just asking questions. You notice that they're just questions. I don't tell them what to do with it. I think here in step 2, what we want to do is talk. I think students need to talk about it, to hear each other thinking about the reading, explain the value of it. Later on, you'll see that I do different things with step 2. Now, then on to the reading tip. I think students need as much help as we can give them, and I like to give them tips. I like them to feel like I'm on their side and I'm going to help them as much as I can. And so I like to offer a reading tip before they start. The tip might explain the value of the reading to the students. It might tell them what to look for. In other readings, it might give them advice on how to read it. It might warn them of pitfalls. There's difficult vocabulary in this. It's filled with technical vocabulary. Here's what you do. So I like to give them, and I talk with them about it rather than just let them read it. So and then what I would next have them students, here's just a brief excerpt of the reading. We didn't print it all here because you really don't need it now. And now let me ask you, please don't try as we go through the apparatus now that follows the reading. Please don't try to read all the questions. There's too many of them. And I didn't put as many as I would use either. Now, right after finishing the reading, the first section here is building vocabulary using context. I have only 2 items up here. I probably would have, at this level 1, maybe 8 or 10. This is just for your convenience and ours, that we don't bore you with seeing too many things here. Notice that, back to scaffolding, notice that it's multiple choice. Multiple choice is recognition of the right answer. That's the easiest. That's giving them the most support. The words I choose will differ here. I'm going to, in level 1, I'm going to choose words that the context clue for the meaning of the word is pretty obvious. You almost can't miss it. It hits you in the face. That's what I want. So I want them to know how easy context can be and how helpful it can be. Later I'll change that. I'll make them harder. You'll see that. And now moving on, word parts. Again, notice that it's fill in the blank here. I've given them the meaning of the word parts. I'm using some words from the passage. Fill in the blank. Again, the most support that I can think to give them. So
and I think,
go ahead.
And I think also, Kathleen, that we've thought that it's useful to use context, to teach context first, even at the lowest level, to try and help students find the meaning of a word whilst they're reading. So that's another part of the scaffolding, is to teach that skill first, or to practice that skill first, and then go to using word parts, which is another strategy for students to use if context doesn't work for them, to then try and look at the word and break out the parts to understand meaning.
Yeah, I think too that with both parts of vocabulary here, you know, we're really not teaching these particular words. I don't really care if the student ever knows what antipsychotic means, but what I do care about is that the student can figure out words that begin with prefixes and have roots. So it's the process. So when you work with a student on this, it's not so much what does antipsychotic mean, it's more of how did you figure it out. And the same with context. If you see a clue, how did it work? How did you find it? What did it tell you? What do you know now that you didn't before? So again, I'm focusing more on process and not on content. I know that's kind of hard to accept, I imagine, but it will do them no good once they're done with this reading if all they can do is understand this reading. So let's move then to thesis and main ideas. Again, there's fewer questions here than I would use, but notice they're very literal. Again, multiple choice, offering the most support. I didn't get into implied main ideas, anything else here. This is just the bare bones. And the same with identifying details. And again, in both thesis, main idea, and details, I'm concerned more with how they found the thesis, how they know it is, or how they found the topic of a paragraph, than I am to them that they know exactly what the topic of this particular paragraph is. Again, focus on process. Same with transitions down further. Again, it's very, I didn't go further than transitions, and I didn't do very much with them. I think at this level we have to focus more on the global meanings and not on particular words and phrases. So very limited coverage. I might ask a couple more questions than I have here, but I wouldn't dwell on it. I also think thinking visually is an important skill. They need to know why the visual is there. Multiple choice, again, to show them just at least they need to know. Now, moving then to writing, there's different levels of ways you can respond to a reading, and I've chosen what I think is one of the most basic ones, that's paraphrasing. And here is the example I used previously about paraphrasing. Some people may look at this and say, well, this is just busy work. They're just looking up words in the passage and putting them in, but really not, I don't think. They have a framework for a paraphrase, and they're going to complete it. So they will then follow through the process of developing a paraphrase with help. And then once I've given them that kind of support, I'm going to move down further, and then I'm going to ask them to create their own paraphrase. And they write their own after I've shown them a model. Again, I'm moving from more help to less. I'm moving from simpler to more complex. Now, my coverage of critical thinking and analysis is limited in level 1. As I said, it's a who did what, when, and where approach. I do want them to think about the issue that the reading discusses, so I've asked a couple of questions. I think I might just ask 2 here. I want them to master the literal before I move full-blown into the critical. So you'll notice the absence of critical thinking questions here. You may be able to move very quickly through level 1 to get to level 2, or you'll see I do more of this. But at the very beginning, especially the first reading I'm doing, I want to be sure that everybody knows what the reading is about and how to find these essential items, vocabulary, main ideas, details, transitions, visuals. I want them to be comfortable with that before I move to anything too more complicated. And then the writing here is paragraph. Notice that it's from personal experience. Think of a situation in which you tried. They're basic questions. You'll see this changes, though. It's low-stakes writing now. You'll see a change as we move on in levels. So let's move to level 2. Again, same reading, same apparatus. Now here, I'm keeping many of the same things, and they are just on the white screen. What is in this yellow color or beige color is what's new. It's what I've added or changed to move to level 2 of the scaffold. So I'm leaving the head note and the previewing. In the connecting, though, now I've got them writing. You see that they're writing an answer to those questions. I think they're ready for that now. You could, if you wanted to, have them write in step 1. I'm moving it. I did it with level 3, but you could, if you felt your class was ready, you could. The reading tips is the same here. You could change that if you felt there was enough things you wanted to warn the students about in the reading tip. I left it the same for this situation. And then let's have a look at the apparatus. Context, I changed the words. They're harder, they're different, they're less obvious, and I think I put more of them in. Again, moving from less to more complex. Word parts, same thing. I left it as multiple choice here. You could, if you feel your students are ready, switch them to writing a definition. I chose to do it in level 3. Thesis and main ideas. I'm now ready to talk about implied main ideas with the students. I still think it's important that we still cover topics, and always the thesis, of course. But and again, I would probably ask more than one implied main idea question here. I just put one for you to see. Again, we're moving to higher level thinking skills now. It's inferential to figure out the implied main idea, while the other questions that I've had previously were factual, literal recall. Details, I left them the same. I might change them if I felt there were less obvious details or secondary details. You could do that if you want. But I was trying not to make this too complicated. So details I didn't do anything with, so it's not highlighted. So now I'm ready to move on to organizational patterns as I start to think about what glues the essay together. Transitions will stay, but now it's time to think about organizational patterns. Since it's the first time they're talking about it, I'm talking about it with them, I gave them multiple choice because they need that support at the beginning. Okay, and then thinking critically, I left that stay the same. And now I'm ready to move on to critical thinking, implied meanings. This is where I'm moving into the critical thinking area. I'm focusing on first the part F is inference, and part G is various critical thinking skills. As we scroll through them, you'll see that I'm talking about author's purpose, and the next tone, there's supporting evidence, interpretation, what does the author mean, agree or disagree with, Item 5 is connotative meaning. Item 6 is more interpretation. 7, interpretation again. I wanted multiple choice though, because again, I think just ask the questions throughout these without the multiple choice. I think the students would flounder. What happens when I do this with students who don't really have the background and the skills is their answers are vague, they're incomplete, they don't say much. It's because they don't know what to say. And I think seeing the multiple choice choices gives them a model that they can use when they need to talk about or write about these ideas. They know that they see the language, they see the format. So I move then into the writing section here. I had paraphrasing in level 1. Now I'm on to mapping. Paraphrase, usually a single paragraph. Now I'm moving to the whole reading. They're drawing a map of the reading that includes all the main points of the reading. So mapping is harder to do than paraphrasing. I might, if I didn't think students know how, you could scaffold it the same way I did paraphrasing. You could give them a partially complete map and have them fill it in and then have them draw their own. But I think if you've taught mapping previously, they should be able to do it. And then for the critical thinking, I'm going to now ask more questions about the issue. I had them examining the issue in level 1. Here it's thinking critically about the issue. It's more, my questions are more extensive, a few more at least, on the issue. And then on the writing of the essays, we're into essays now, not paragraphs. Less personal experience. They're writing about aspects of the reading. Question 2 asks them to consider the title and write about it. They're examining viewpoints in item 1. They're addressing a concept, freedom of choice, in item 3. The scaffolding then is moving from the kind of writing, paragraph to essay, from less personal, from personal to less personal, and from concepts and ideas from your own ideas, your own thoughts and opinions. So now let's look at level 3. My emphasis here is on, higher level yet, is on analysis, evaluation, and response. Step 1, I'm going to ask the students to list a topic, the topics they predict the readings will be about. I'm having them write. They should at this level be able to, we need to move them to independence so that when they pick out a reading, when they don't have us around anymore, they know to preview and stop and think, what am I going to expect in this reading? So I want them to write. I did the same, I added a step 3 here too. I want them now to start highlighting and annotating as they read. You could move that, you could start it in level 2 if your students were ready. That's why these levels are so arbitrary. You might, for one class, you might add step 3, for another class you might not. You might add it for sooner for one class and not another. It's just a matter of knowing the students. So they're writing their own predictions here, and then they're starting to highlight and annotate. Reading tip I left the same. Now when we get down to vocabulary, sorry students, no more help, multiple choice is gone. Write your own sentence defining the word. And again, though, it's not these words that are so important, it's how they can find the meaning of the word in the context, or if they have to, through a dictionary. I left word parts as is. That you could convert to, it's hard to convert that to writing a sentence unless you just have them write their own sentence using the word antipsychotic. That would be one option. The thesis and main ideas. Here you'll see that I took out topic sentences. Topics are gone. I don't think we need that anymore at this level. They should be able to do that by now, and they need to focus on the bigger ideas, the thesis and implied main ideas. The details, as you'll see, no more multiple choice. Write your own sentence completing it. Open-ended is more difficult. More writing is required. And again, if you wanted to put this into level 2, you could. I put it in 3. Part D, the methods, I left that the same. It's really hard to ask them one question to write a sentence telling what the organizational pattern is. I think that they will get lost even at this level. And thinking visually, I changed that. There is a photo with the reading. This one I changed to make them think of, if there weren't a reading, what reading would you put in? And then show me what section of the reading it illustrates. Again, it's a different type of thinking. It's a more creative thinking. It's moving them from, again, literal to more critical and reasoning skills. I left the implied main ideas as they are, because it's very hard to get at them any other way. Jill and I have played with this. Various other consultants that I've worked with have played with this. We just can't quite get beyond it. So if any of you know how to get beyond this, I'd love to hear that from you. And thinking critically, again, notice multiple choice is gone. It's some of the same questions that I kept here, but they have to write their own answer. And I hope they're ready by then after they've seen my modeling through level 1 through level 2. I think they're better prepared to answer them on their own. And then we're ready for response to reading. Here I put in a summary. It's, I think, the hardest of the three, paraphrasing, mapping, and summarizing. It's the higher level skill of the three because it requires pulling ideas together.
And I think this is a skill, Kathleen, that you would teach like paraphrase, where you would provide examples, you provide guidelines, and then maybe, you know, a partially completed summary, you would scaffold it. I mean, we're just showing parts of the scaffolding process, but you would scaffold teaching summary just like you scaffolded teaching paraphrasing.
Yes, I think you're right. Either you've taught it before or you need to do it while you're using the reading. Analyzing the issue, I've added, it's more complex now. I want them to look more closely at the reading, to examine it, to evaluate it, analyze it, the timeliness, evidence. And then in question 5 there, what I'm doing is moving them to a difficult task. Instead of thinking just about this reading, I placed it within the context of a chapter on a topic of conformity and nonconformity, and I'm extending their thinking beyond this reading to related ideas and a larger issue of conformity versus nonconformity. So I've taken them here to, I think, the furthest we can away from the reading and still be focused with the reading, but using it in a brand new way. And then the essays, here I've moved to high-stakes writing, producing a documented paper. The students here need to research, use MLA, in-text citations, prepare the entire thing. Again, of course, this would have to be scaffolded too. And I can't show you everything on the screen here. If they've never done it before, of course, I would give them a source and say, let's just use one source. Let's see how you'd build that into a paper. Okay, show me how you would include a citation. Show me how you would put it in the works cited page. So I would progress through this as well, but this is the end result of level 3. Well, that concludes my demonstration. I hope I've shown you a creative way to take any reading you want to teach and create either your own set of apparatus for whatever class you're working with, or perhaps I've shown you how to take any reading from any reading and writing textbook, pick the reading, and choose and adapt the questions to make them work for your particular class. Well, thank you so much for listening, and I'd love to hear your questions now.
All right, thank you, Kathleen. While we're waiting for questions, Jill, is there anything you'd like to elaborate on?
I think Kathleen's done a great job of sort of covering the bases. It is, I mean, this is something the two of us have been talking about for a long time, is how do you teach students skills in a ongoing way that will help them develop the basic skills they need to build up to the more complicated skills they're going to need to use to be successful in college. And how do you do that using a variety of readings from different topics, maybe different themes that would engage students. So, I think the main thing that Kathleen said that stands out for me is that you're always trying to decide what's going to work best for the classroom that you have. She's given an example of 3 levels that you could use with one reading as the basis. Obviously, it could be 3 different readings because, as she said, the point is not that reading per se. It's how do you help students learn skills they can use and apply to any reading in any situation when there aren't questions and there isn't a teacher to ask. So this is one way to look at it. This is one way to scaffold it, but I think it depends on your classroom, and as everybody on the call probably knows, you might have the same class level or course number, but each semester the students in it are completely different, and the classroom has a different makeup. So as Kathleen said a number of times during the presentation, you would change your questions depending on that group. So you might start at a very basic level with one group and only get to the second level, whereas with another group you might start at the second level and progress rapidly to the third level.
Okay, thanks. We do have one question. Do you ever interchange the levels based on student needs? So for example, would you ask students questions from both level 1 and level 2?
Oh, I think so. Yeah, especially if you've got a class where you've got some level 1 students and some level 2. As I said, we don't want to leave anybody behind, and we don't want to overlook anybody. And so, yes, I would mix and match this any way I had to meet my students' interests and needs.
Okay, thank you. We have one more question. I also stress the process of writing, but I still get arguing from some that want to jump to the final step. How do you deal with this?
I'm not sure I understand exactly. Can you repeat?
I'll try to interpret it. Essentially, instead of working through the scaffolding, they want to just jump to level 3 and not make the steps necessary.
Oh, I see. They just want to get the writing done.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, again, I think that students need to understand that we don't really care that they write about this particular paragraph. What we really care about is that they learn a process, and so that when they get in their next English class or they're in psychology and they're supposed to write a paper, they know how to do it. Or from the reading point of view, they have to be able to read it first and understand it before you can write about it. I don't know how to lock them out from going there. I think it's more of getting them to buy in to, we're really here to learn how, not what. And that paragraph you write at the end isn't what I'm here to teach you. As much as I'm teaching you how to find the ideas, how to organize your ideas. What you say in that paragraph doesn't so much matter as it does how you got there. And I try to get them to buy into that, but it's hard.
Could the person who gave us the question maybe clarify it a little bit further, Jen, so that we know exactly? Because I'm not clear whether it's they're saying the students don't want to do the work, or whether the professor would prefer to have a way to get to level 3 immediately.
Oh.
Okay, so we'll wait for that to come in. We did have another question, and this instructor says, this is interesting. I'm wondering what led to the approach of using multiple choice and true and false in teaching integrated reading and writing.
I like to start with multiple choice and true false because it gives the students the most help. Multiple choice is simply recognition of the right answer among 4. It's there, your job is to find it. That is easier than it is to say, okay, tell me the main idea of paragraph 16. That requires more complex thinking. I want to give students the most help at the beginning and move them to doing it themselves. So I find that, and the same is true of true false. The answer is either right or wrong, and it's only 2 choices. And that's a much easier cognitive task than it's hard to ask the question any other way too. Is it true or is it not true that? And then the answer is yes or no. So you can't, if you want to ask that kind of information, you don't really get very far no matter what you do with it. But I like to move from giving them the most help I can. And I also think that students are used to multiple choice. They've taken tests with it. And so let's start with it because they're familiar with it, and then let's move them to the less familiar, write for me about this. Jill, can you add to that?
Yes, I mean, I wish we could dialogue here with the person asking the question, because I know there are concerns about multiple choice because it is such a literal level of comprehension that you're just asking someone basically to recognize the correct answer, which does require a little bit of thinking. Hopefully they've read the reading and they're recognizing the right answer because they've read it, but also they could obviously do it through a process of elimination. But I think what Kathleen's saying is that initially you want to provide support. Maybe these are students who have not been successful in reading before. Presumably they haven't been, or they wouldn't be in a developmental reading class. This is the format they're used to, and it's a way to start the process of getting them engaged with thinking about the reading. So it's a simpler method of helping students to begin to think about how to find the answers they need to from a reading, for whatever the purpose is. What's really important, I think, is that we move away across the levels increasingly towards, and what we're not talking about here is you wouldn't just have a reading or 3 readings in a row with apparatus set up the way that we're saying here, apparatus meaning the exercises and activities. Obviously, you as the teacher are in the classroom teaching these different skills to students so that between their reading an entry-level or a low-level reading at the beginning of the class where they're answering true, false, and multiple choice, by the end they're reading higher-level, more complex readings, and there's been many classroom sessions talking about and demonstrating and practicing, summarizing and paraphrasing and all the different skills. So there's a whole piece that we're not discussing here, which is happening in the classroom, which is building student skills so that at the end you can ask a question and have an open-ended response because the student has learned what the skills are, knows how to apply them, what the right skills are for that particular reading challenge at that time, and can produce a coherent written answer.
I also think that with multiple choice, I don't stop with, yes, you're right, the answer is C. What I do is say, how do you know that? Find the evidence in the paragraph that suggests that that is an opinion, not a fact, or why that is the topic sentence and not the other choices. So I use it to teach.
Okay, we got a little bit of clarification on the writing process question, and this instructor mentioned that they do stress that students write in steps like the writing process, and that's where the majority of her grading is focused. But for example, she assigned a video tutorial and had workshops in script and storyboarding, but a small number of students just wanted to grab a camera and tape the end product, which is what they seem to do with their papers as well. And in spite of it only being 4th of the grade, the students still wanted to just get the final product done. What do you do to address that, to emphasize the process?
I think I'd lock them out of the writing. I'd make the writing contingent upon seeing the video tutorial in some way. I can only go so far, I think, in motivating is what I earlier suggested, and understanding why you need to do it. I guess you have to lock them out of being able to produce the final product until they've gone through your steps. It sounds hard and cold, but I guess it's practical.
Well, Kathleen, I guess also some of it would be, I think it's a real problem because you're going to have some students who probably can just do the final product, but you're going to have a lot of students who can't. So maybe it has to be contingent on their doing, if it's a writing process as opposed to a video process, they have to turn in their brainstorming and first draft and all the process steps, show that they've actually completed those steps before they turn over a finished piece of writing. What do you think?
That's a good suggestion.
All right, do we have any other questions? All right, I want to thank everybody for attending. We really do appreciate your attention throughout the entire day, for those of you who are on with us all day. And thank you, Kathleen and Jill, for your presentation. Kathleen's materials will be available on our Pearson English Pedagogy and Practice website, as well as the recording from this session. Please check that out later next week. And if you have any other questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Steve will put my information up here in just a minute for you guys. And I just want to say thank you once again. We appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, now you can pause the video, go to Master and select Performance. Follow the instructions and analyze the extracts. Come back here when you have finished the performance task. Okay, so how do you feel about the lesson? Let's look closely at some of the extracts and see what we can learn from them. Extract number 1. What do you think the teachers were trying to do? Why do you think he was doing so? That's right, the teachers were trying to use pictures to arouse students' interest or curiosity. What about the second extract? Yes, the teacher was asking questions to contextualize the picture, and that is to relate the situation in the story to students' experience. He then asked students to work in groups for more difficult tasks. As you can see, the combination of individual work and pair work or group work gives students more opportunities to speak and to communicate. All the steps that the teacher did was to prepare students for the story, and these instructions made up the pre-reading stage of the lesson. Now on to the third extract. The teacher referred to the story title, and he asked the student to link the title and the picture. In the mock lesson, it seems that the students read the story at home and they may already know about the pictures and the link between the title and the pictures. In your teaching context, you can still use the same pre-reading techniques to prepare students for the reading parts of the lesson. In the next extract, after students have read the text, they move on to post-reading activity in which they have to summarize and paraphrase part of the story. And in order to prepare the students for the task, the teacher first asked students to recall summarizing and paraphrasing skills. He then explained how to summarize and how to paraphrase a text. So this is called scaffolding, and by scaffolding, the teacher can make summarizing and paraphrasing skills less difficult for students, and students may find it easier to summarize or paraphrase part of the story. Another important post-reading activity is highlighting new words and important words in the story. The teacher used different ways to teach new words, including explanation, using antonyms, synonyms, examples, and pictures. As you can see, those are some of the most effective ways to teach new words. It should also be noted that the teacher asked his students to come up with situations where they use the words like reluctantly. It is this step that helps students to know how to use words in context. And as teachers, and when you teach vocabulary, you should really think about this. You think about asking your students to make sentences with the word as well, so that they can learn how to use the word. One important part of a reading lesson is making sure students can read and understand the content. In this extract, the teacher asked his students to answer some questions related to the content of the story. Now, in the last extract, the teacher moved on to another post-reading activity, which is also a speaking activity. Student works in pairs to share what they think about the issues related to language learning. This is again a common and effective way to incorporate speaking into a reading lesson. So, as you can see, by carefully analyzing the mock lesson, I hope you have learned a few techniques and ways to plan and deliver a reading lesson that integrates speaking as well. And always remember to make changes and adaptation to fit your students' level and your teaching context.